Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Let me figure out where we are. There you go. That's me. I'm Trevon. Hello. I'm a arts educator in residence here. If I haven't seen you, it's because my office is on the 3rd floor and maybe you haven't come up there, but come say hi, and I'm around. But yeah, I titled this talk The Other Black Mirror. So what I'm going to be looking at or trying to frame it through are my 3 theses. I was just joking with Catherine that I think I was more ready last month because I didn't reread these, and then I reread these and was like, oh my word, there's a lot to cover. And then, basically this is my undergraduate honors thesis, my graduate thesis from Iowa in film and video production, and my graduate thesis from Maryland in studio arts. And they kind of all connect in framing these arguments around the ideas, perceptions, representations, and artworks, exhibitions of blackness in my body of work, if you will. What I mean by that is not so much that I'm going to tell you what blackness is supposed to be. A lot of what I ended up ending at in the last thesis was kind of a rejection of that notion, and I'm going to walk you through why I ended up at that place. But there's other stuff that I think about, and I think about a lot of things, and I'm not going to show you all of it. There's a bunch of things that I keep on my wall to have me think through processes, and it would be way too long. This is already longer than it should be, but I'll talk about some of the main projects that kind of guided these ideas to what might be closer to developing some kind of theory than I thought I was at. So that's really interesting. That theory might be maybe a categorization of alienation as a pathway to empathy, which is a weird statement to say out loud. But maybe we should start at the beginning, okay? So the beginning, I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland. That's my house down there that I grew up in. 90s kid, so Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I was a fan of Grant Hill and Orlando Magic. I went to Cal Ripken Jr. baseball games and stuff like that. Not really a lot of engagement with making art when I was this age, but moved around as a kid, ended up in Kansas City for a little bit. That's this school right here, Mark Twain Elementary. And then we moved to the Carolinas, where I lived in Fort Mill, South Carolina. The significance of that is Carowinds. This is where I began my artistic journey.
Experience those emotions in a whole new way. All the exhilaration, all the memories, all the thrills of the Paramount movies you love come to life beyond the big screen. Visit the Paramount Park nearest you. Paramount Parks, the best of Hollywood entertainment, now playing.
Yeah. And it was that exciting. I was 15, working in a theme park, got to ride all the rides on my breaks, got free food because I was this tall when I was 15, and they were like, oh, look at you. But this is where I also dated the person inside Angelica, which, having that up there, this is 99% sure that is them inside this costume. I stole this image from the internet. That's funny. Anyway, so Carowinds is where I started doing caricatures. So this is where I learned a lot in terms of art. Both the principles of design, organization, and stuff like that, but also some of the philosophies that I hold in the ideas behind depictions of people and how we care about people. So I see caricature as an act of love, even though we might be historicized to engage with only the parts of caricature that were within stereotype, right? But caricature, live caricature especially, is a moment with an individual that we are sharing together to create something unique to them. We are celebrating their uniqueness in this way, and unique to the moment. I still do caricatures, and whereas I did them in theme parks before, I was stationary, working in Carowinds. Then I went and worked in Florida for a long time. Then I started doing fairs and traveling around and drawing caricatures at fairs. We do get repeat customers, and so that's always cool. This is 3 years of this couple here. They come back every year and they let me try new stuff, and it's cool to get to know people and become a part of their little community in that way. So community building, respecting uniqueness of people, this all started in this caricature world, even if I didn't understand the language that I was going to be using later on. But a lot happens when you're working in tourism, when you're working in the public for a long time, when you are in a place that doesn't quite see you as an individual, even as you work with a lot of different individuals. So I decided that I needed a change, and I either was going to move across the country or go back to school. And it turns out I got into UCF, and so I started my undergrad later on in my life there in 2013. So I went there, did drawings, a lot of self-portraiture, a lot of self-portraiture, mainly contour, trying to teach myself how to paint as well. And then, you know, I'm doing these, I'm looking at myself as self-reflective. I'm also thinking about the ways that I can use these techniques in caricature, thinking of more of a fine art caricature kind of realm. But then I got into a painting class where the professor made some remarks about this caricature piece, relating it to animals baring their teeth and being angry. This is around the time that Trevon Martin was killed, and we had a lot of protests, and I was like, what are you talking about? And so I began to question the ways that the work was being seen in realms that I wasn't necessarily presenting it. But I decided to double down, and I said, okay, how black is this one? Okay, what about this one? How black is that one? Why don't you tell me how black this one is? Or better yet, how black is this one? And so I started to question the space that I was in, interrogate the space and their preconceptions or expectations on what the art was supposed to be, and the caricatures that they were making of what they expected my experience to be and wanted to see from my experience in that way. And that's where I began to engage with theory. And so one of my undergraduate thesis was titled "Of Martyrs and Minstrels." And that is looking at the ways that Black Death is still a form of entertainment in this country, linking it back to Southern humor in terms of this book here, Minstrelsy and Murder, connects the fear of death, the fear of the Klan in the South, and how people would take that performance of fear, whatever happens there, and caricature that for entertainment amongst their friends in the South. And that created a certain type of humor, okay? And so if you relate that fear of death as being entertainment on one side to expectations put on what we would say are heroes in Black community, you think about Malcolm X, you think about Fred Hampton, you think about all these people, they all get killed early on. So the idea of the hero in that sense in this Black space would be someone who's expected to die, right? And so it starts to color how you see heroism and how you see the narratives of hero. And so I started to play in that space by pairing superhero iconography with Black characters in hoodies, homemade outfits. I also kept making work in that painting class that kept challenging the professor. They were eventually the chair of my papers, so like, we're good. They learned what was going on, but it produced work for me. So the Super Series is what I'd named that body of work. It was paintings, drawings, prints, but mostly films that engaged the idea of superhero, the hero as spectacle. I also did dye transfer, 16 millimeter cameraless films during that time as well. It's like a cathartic practice, and my first engagement with 16 millimeter film. But the Super Series films span about six films, starting with Delusions of Grandeur, which is the top left right now playing. I have the bottom one playing because it opens up into a triptych about the same time that this ends. But anyway, Delusions of Grandeur was just kind of an investigation of where, like, what is our role as artists and what kind of change can we make? So I made this with a focus group. All of the audio from the focus group was put into the piece, and the people who came to the focus group were invited to be the crew on the set, were invited to be the cast in the set, so it was like this community building, community made kind of piece. The second one was titled Clear, where I'm playing with expectations and tropes in cinema as well. I'm pairing pop music with these heavier themes, kind of looking at the ways that we do make spectacle of these things as well. The third one was called Fitted Descriptions. This is a little more narrative, but it's a hybrid piece. There's documentary elements in it, where we go out into the public in the superhero costume and engage with real people, but that feeds back into this narrative. Again, looking at how real people would respond in a real situation to see someone walking around in a superhero costume. What does it mean? And there's interviews in that sense. The bottom one, No More Heroes, was the senior capstone piece. It was a single film, but projected in 3 channels in the same space that you would watch like a regular film. So the other film screen on a single channel, then my film comes on. When it pops open 2 more screens, everyone's like, oh, I'm looking around. But one of the things that does connects to alienation theory. Bertolt Brecht talked about this distancing effect. And the point of it was to get you to not lose yourself into the film, not lose yourself into the narrative and become disappeared. The point was always to be aware of yourself so you can understand the politics of what you're making, understand that what you're consuming has been constructed, and so that you're less susceptible to like propaganda and so on and so forth. So it's used a lot in theater with like title cards. And so I translated it to film, not just with acting, which is kind of one of the ways we see it mostly, but with form. And so by putting us in a formal situation that we may not be used to, you're also distanced from being absorbed in the narrative. In this triptych scenario, when the screens come on, you are turning your head while someone else might be turning their head the other way. And so now you have a physical bodily experience of being in the same scenario, but having a different experience in the same scenario. So I'm turning physical these ideas that I'm trying to express about different experiences in life and living and stuff like that. At the same time, I'm still interested in ideas of black as medium and what that means. So I learn a little bit of ceramics, and I'm painting with with no black, but making a black painting. I'm painting with different names for house paints. If you go to Home Depot, it's like ultra white, super pure white, innocent white, excellent white, the whitest white. And you're just like, oh, okay. And so you put them all together. Our painters know that even the same color and different brands will have different hues and textures and values. And so I start to think about ways that I can learn the mediums, but stay in the realm of things that I'm playing with. Optical blackness, what does that mean? A lot of these are shown in dark spaces, but you can still pick up on certain aspects of them, but not others, and then having conversations afterwards about that. So span print, and then I'm making films still in this time period, and there's a filmmaker, Peter Kubelka, that talks about the space between frames that became really interesting for me. And in that space between frames, that's where he says that the real magic of cinema lies. It's not between shots, it's between frames. And what this means is film is typically captured 24 frames per second, or we experience it 24 frames per second. And between those frames, there is a change. And in that change, there's so much that happens. And so I start to play with that by digitizing film and stopping it between frames to get these kind of monster figures, and start thinking about what monsters means. What's the term mean? What's the language that we use when we think of monsters? How often is monsters used to describe black people? And I'm also still painting and trying to do prints and trying to learn other stuff. So it's not all sad stuff. I'm also working on other people's films and other people's sets. All of these, I'm either the director of photography or the production designer. And so community building through film becomes a large thread in what I'm doing. And that actually takes me into my first graduate program at the University of Iowa. So I went from UCF, Florida, to University of Iowa. And these are some of the texts that really stuck out to the work that I'm making. In the Wake, on Blackness and Being, thinking about the state of drowning, thinking about the state of mourning, thinking about this constant position within Black life in this country as a state of being in the wake constantly. Then thinking about the Anthropocene and the end of the world and what that means, and how often we ask the question when we say the end of the world, the end of whose world? I think a lot of times we have this impression that once capitalism dies, the world is going to be gone. But there might be something after, right? But we don't usually think about that. Or at least that's not what we want you to think about that in terms of we, the US empire, blah, 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 blah. Anyway. And accented cinema is thinking about the exilic cinema, thinking about being in exile and diasporic films. Obviously, the state of African Americans are a constant state of exile in this country, both removed from a motherland, but also not given the same rights in this country for several years, centuries, I should say. Then the piece on the end, Humanitarian Ethics and Documentary Politics by Pooja Rangan, Brett Story, Paige Sarlin. This connected me back to some of the ideas in caricature that I have. Some of the ways that we engage with documentary gives us this sense of immediacy. This is what Pooja Rangan talks about. And what is being described there is this, like, I feel bad, and therefore I can do something to remove this bad feeling. Because I feel bad, I can donate to those hungry kids through this infomercial tonight. And now I've done something. Yes, the world has changed now. I am better now. And Pooja Rangan is saying that by using those kids, it's still exploitative. By giving you those faces to look at, rather than the systems that are creating that state of hunger, we are perpetually in this cycle of continuing to exploit these people. And Brett's story is kind of talking about something similar with prisons, Prison in 12 Landscapes, where Brett's story is showing us how we are all implicated in the prison industrial complex, and how deeply embedded in a lot of our environments it is without us even knowing, because we're often looking at the crime and not the factors for the crime. And so these started raising questions in some of the works that I was making, And so I started off there with thinking about the end of the world and making this really bad film where I'm taking comic book pages and cutting them out and then pairing them up with old archival footage. Where's the mouse? There you are. Let's skip ahead to here. So I have like archival footage in there as well. I really hated this piece and I put it down and was like, we're never gonna talk about this one. But actually when I got here, I was like, you know, I can pick this back up because there's a lot of video games that deal with the idea of dystopia and Armageddon, and a lot of them are set in Boston, which is like wild. There's like 3 I can think of off the top of my head that are set here. So I'm like, there's something I can do with filming the real, filming the imagined destruction, thinking about what happens afterwards, et cetera, et cetera. So I might pick that film back up. Anyway. In Iowa, I'm still trying to think about how to make something in this space, but then we get the pandemic. And obviously I can't group up with a lot of people to make these films. And so I do a lot more personal filmmaking, a lot more looking at the medium, critiquing the medium. And so this film, Paper Bag Test, pairs the idea of the paper bag test, which is a discriminatory process, promotes colorism. If your skin is darker than the paper bag, you are denied entry, yada, yada, yada. And so I pair that with exposure practices in cinematography and thinking about the ways that these languages are the same. Camera technology is made for lighter skin. We still use some of the same exposure practices. You can see in several films, even today, that people don't like dark skin well, okay? But we are mediated in this way. We are learned this way to engage the media this way. And then painting a black paper bag with all black paints, different kinds of paints. You see all the different colors in it, even though if you removed one of those black paints into a different context, it would just look black. But next to all the other blacks, it feels like it has different colors and textures and values in the painting. And so I'm playing with language here, but trying to put it into a medium and trying to have a conversation back and forth with language, medium, and some of our practices. So I made this other film. I forgot the sound was on this. Anyone see CB4, Cell Block 4? No? Okay. Anyway.
Dark skin, and then within the light, there's light bright. Light bright. Light bright. Light bright, almost white. Oreo. Monotone, monochrome. Mulatto, octoroon. Quadroon, septune. Yellow. High yellow.
Probably the most inflammatory that I remember being called.
All right, we're not going to play the most inflammatory thing that the person's ever been called, but I was in a class that was about historiography, which is the study of how we can categorize history through the documents of the times, right? So we're looking at newspapers, magazines, to kind of see how people lived in that time. And so I went through Jet and Ebony magazines all the way back from when they started, and the amount of skin lightening cream documents that are in those up through the 60s and 70s, which around the 70s is around the time that Kodak starts to get pressure to, starts to get pressure to get better color definition in their browns in the film stocks, okay? And so I make this film that's pairing it, let me just turn the sound off and maybe that will solve life's problems. That engages the ideas of Lacan, the mirror stage, the way we see ourselves and then are reflecting it back and create our beings with the ways that certain groups are delivered how they should look and what they should do and how they should perform. And so I make this film to kind of both critique Lacan, but also to critique our culture and our media and the ways that a lot of this stuff still remains today. Inside that, I'm also thinking about what is called carceral apparatus, and what that means is the state of the medium still putting us in a state of arrest, in a state of surveillance, in a state of policing. And so I think about the ways that we're all implicated in those systems by putting this setup in a little security booth area in one of the art buildings, and I'm clicking on a lot of things. I'm going to move away from the mouse. But in that, you also are being surveilled at the same time, which you see later on here. This piece is called the Oracle Project, or Batman's a Cop, All Cops Are Batman. And so, you know, Batman's a fun little analogy for policing. You know, everyone says Batman isn't a cop, but in some of the videos I found, you see some of the technologies that are in like the Batman games that are like able to detect threats and so on and so forth. There are departments that have drones and things that scan to say who's a threat and who's not, and so on and so forth. Pair that with the fact that camera technology has a bias against darker skin, and you can see that in, you know, computer cameras that don't pick up motion if you're darker skin and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, so we have that issue, but we also have tracking technology in policing that works just fine, you know. So a lot of this is highlighting the ways that these redundancies are ridiculous. But yeah. I also make other stuff. It's not all sad. Sometimes it's about the other side of it. Sometimes it's about what else is there, not just pointing at the problem, but what other things exist outside of that. And so community building becomes really important for me. So Difficult Donuts up here in the top left, that's a film that is made out of collective stories, and then I found surrogates for the places in these collective stories in the environment we were in. It reads as a single diaristic film, but then by the end you see all the different people who contributed to the stories. I did a documentary project with Black Liberation Space, which was a space opened up in Iowa for Black creatives to have somewhere to go to make work. It was very cool how it got started. It was Andre Wright and Brandon Soul from Humanize My Hoodie who helped put the space together. And I was there as an artist, and then one day I brought my camera in, and Andre was like, yo, that camera's sick. It's shot on mostly 16 millimeter, but also some digital. So he's like, can we like make something here? And I was like, sure. And so we made this documentary. Barrier is a film that I made that is mostly improv. And what I mean by that is I worked with the actors separately. We developed characters. And then they met for the first time on set the day that we shot this. One is speaking Hebrew, the other is speaking Chinese. They have no idea what each other is saying. I have no idea what they're saying. But even when I edited it together without having that information, when they saw it, they were like, this makes total sense. I'm like, yeah, because there's other stuff here that we can pick up on, that we can understand without language as a barrier. But anyway, so I make other things that are not so depressing and sad. What are you? Let's see what this one is. Oh, we skipped a lot, didn't we? All right, there's that one. And then, oh yeah, I had a thesis. So yeah, as one does in grad school. My second attempt at trying to talk about my work at Iowa, I made a piece called My Imagined Nations. Okay, this combined the work from the Super Series, it combined other works photo works that I was trying to do. I Image in Black Futures is the photo project up there. It was a walkthrough exhibit. I had a lot of projection going on in a bunch of different rooms. We had the Super Series was all in that room, costumes from it, paintings, drawings from it, all the films were playing. You go around the back, there's the photo series. It was all makeshift on the soundstage that we had there because there were no exhibition spaces in the film department. And so I was like, I'm gonna build a whole set that you have to like go through. You come around the back, there's like a little cave back there that had a few monitors. Our imagination, the middle section, I asked people to leave stuff with me that they wanted me to care for. I was there for a week, 9 to 9 every day, and held space for people to come, drop stuff off. I taught people cameraless filmmaking, and then we projected it back into the exhibit. But ultimately, I also made a film to go along with this project. This film started off trying to wrestle with feeling of isolation. Obviously, after the pandemic, things changed. But as I was making it, I had these moments where people were like, hey, can I come and help you? And I'm like, oh, I was gonna do this by myself, but like, I guess, yeah, come on. And then my dad helped me film a section of this. I'm like, whoa, where did that come from, you know? So it was a really cool, serendipitous reflection on how the medium is also a community builder. It's not just a reflection of the dark side of everything. And so this becomes, instead of the film that it was going to be, becomes a reflection of that. And so then we get to Maryland. And in Maryland, I don't want to make film work. I want to work with material. And what does that mean to work with material? I'm using these texts primarily to kind of frame the work. It's still connected, thinking about the end of the world, thinking about the idea of a hyper object, which Timothy Morton describes as something so beyond our scope, but we still feel the effects of it. We can't really describe the thing, but we know it's there. And so it attempts to define the invisible and visible threads of climate change in this. The visibility and invisibility of other systems can also be put into question. So I pair blackness with the hyper object, and I start to develop projects to say how blackness has expanded beyond its intended use as this categorization, but to be something else and something bigger. But what does that mean? What does that look like? I had no idea, so I collected rocks. I went to places, that's Wilmer's Park in Prince George's County, which was a spot on the Chitlin Circuit. That's where they played go-go music festivals, and it's all dilapidated and falling down now. I was looking at hair textures. I was trying to make these geodesic domes and figure out what kind of monsters I could make with that. I was learning how to dye using indigo and then printing back on top of that, making resists through a reduction print process. I made this weird funerary box that I was like, let me do performance. And I was like, I don't do performance. And so I stopped doing that. Recontextualized some of my other work by making other ways that it can exhibit. And thinking about back to this idea of the geodesic domes, thinking about the simple shape of the triangle and how it can be built up from smaller things, going into digital and thinking about the wireframing and that. And then I tried to make some kind of collage work, going back into my comic books and thinking about the Super Series, and I really hated it. And the next semester, I kind of lost my eyesight. And so I had to figure out something else. So I took ceramics and learned how to make stuff with my hands that I didn't have to focus on. You know, drawing is like very much for me like a focusing thing. So my aunt quilts, I learned that, and so I learned how to quilt, and that turned into the next series that I made, where I did these stuffed quilts that we're also projection mapped into. So thinking about location, geographies, thinking about image, who we get to see, who we're not allowed to see, withholding the image, all of these questions that were reflected in some of the other pieces and works come back here. I also made little rock monsters that I put in the windows, projection mapped all over this place. And so I was wrestling with how to get back to the idea of material and what is a black material, what does it look like. This is a Gwendolyn Brooks poem that shows up in one of my other pieces. But my thesis in Maryland ended up being this really dark room that had this 18-foot tall tower in it, and then black acrylic panels around the walls. Inside that tower is completely dark, but you can go inside it. The only light is from the opening. So you're left in there with yourself. It's this blackness that's, if you're afraid of the dark, it's very scary. But when you go in, it's really soft, and it's really comfortable, and people wanted to stay in there. And so there's this confrontation of their fears, and then stepping in and realizing something else is present beyond that fear space. But the pieces around the walls, these panels are acrylic panels. They are photo collages on acrylic panels printed, but also etched into. So this is one of the composites to make it. So the pieces that are in negative would be etched using a laser etch process. But you can't really see them. I have one of my test pieces here. The rest of them are still in Maryland right now. But this is where we get to the other black mirror. And looking in blackness, looking for blackness, what happens here in these pieces is you see your reflection first, right? But you also have to get engaged with the piece. You can come up and look at this. It's a test piece, so we can pass it around, throw it, whatever. But you can't see the image unless you get bodily involved. Unless you implicate yourself in the engagement, you cannot see the image that is withheld from you. And you're in a dark space, you have to find the light. You have to become bodily engaged. So it's a little bit silly because you see people kind of like doing all this stuff, which is awesome. So there's still humor in this, but it's engaging that fact that looking into blackness is not really where the questions get answered. It's looking at yourself, hence the other black mirror, and that's 11:45. Okay, anyway, that's it. Cool. Yeah, feel free to come up and try to see the image in this test piece here. If you have any questions, happy to answer them. There's a little stuffed thing. Anybody want to hold a stuffed thing? Okay, cool. Yeah. Any questions? So, please.
Is there a place to see all of your films in full?
No, actually. So I have links if you'd like to see them. Yes, there actually is a place I can direct you to. I can send links. So I am interested in a different kind of gatekeeping, but one that engages community. So I don't put them out as like a generator of attention and capital or these sorts of things, but I share them with anyone who's interested. So yeah, just come find me, I'll share them happily. It's actually, all the links are, wait, I have to close this first. There we go. I have all the links right there. So like if you want to see them, I can just give you this document and you have access to them. Yeah. Cool. Please.
When you went into undergrad, did you anticipate focusing on film the way you did, or did something emerge as you started those?
Something emerged as I started. I didn't have anyone that wanted to make films when I was younger or when I was working in Orlando. Like we would go see films and talk about them every now and then, but no one was really interested in making them, so I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I wanted to engage storytelling in that way, because I thought that the fine art practice was going to be for caricatures, And I was like, then the film can be the storytelling, and I'll split it up that way, and ah, ha, ha. But then I got there, and I picked up a 16mm film camera, and I was like, no, I'm gonna do some weird stuff. But that helped me think through some of the ideas and make some channels and connections. But I still work on conventional narrative sets. I think it's like one of the best experiences. But my work took a different direction, yeah, for sure. Please.
Do you have a favorite piece?
A favorite piece? Oh, goodness. They say don't pick your favorite kid because they'll let you down. My favorite piece is the one that I'm working on now. And what I mean by that is whatever's in front of me. Yeah. So right now, it has to be that piece I told you all I hated, that I can work on here in a different context. So I have to make that my favorite piece. Yeah, this one. Ugh. But it's going to be my favorite piece right now. Please.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about what moving to Boston is your favorite piece?
Yeah, we can talk about that. So, in kind of thinking back to this idea of the end of the world, it also connects to some of these other threads that I have mind mapped out here. We surrogate our experiences through media, right? It's like metaphor and all this stuff. But thinking about the end of the world, it's a little less surrogated for certain communities. Like it's a lot closer. And so I'm thinking about the ways that we use games to kind of think about how we would engage with these like afterlives. Comics are also a way that we engage with these afterlives, and I'm matching. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm like, yeah, juxtaposing. Both play in that space, but also suggest that there are people who are enacting this. It's not just a random what-if scenario. And so by pairing the real with the fake, I can do more of that dance. Yeah. It's all reflexive. It's all a mirror. It's all playing back on itself. Yeah. Anything else? No? Oh, please.
Maybe talk a little bit about how you're teaching. This is the first time you've been sort of deep in this teaching.
Yeah.
How that's impacting how you're thinking.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think some of my students. This is my first time in a small program. It's my first time in a specifically art program. So it's exciting to be around people who like, this is what we do. This is what we're going to do. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And so like, while I'm engaging with these other texts and stuff like that, I'm also thinking about the ways like, oh, I can just paint now. Like I can just like, oh, this is nice, you know? And so looking at people who are like, yeah, I'm a painter. And that's enough. I'm like, yes, I'm gonna follow your lead, students, and I'm gonna just be a painter today. And so it's nice to be in a space where like, this is the thing, you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know if that made sense. It made sense to me. Anyway, cool. I talked really fast. If you have any questions, come find me. I'm around. All right, thank you.